So we're all becoming pretty familiar with large language models or LLMs through applications like OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Bard. They're pretty impressive, but they still struggle to be 100% reliable when generating text. Sometimes they're not very accurate. So if you're thinking about including a generic chatbot in your website to help your clients, you might think twice, and I don't blame you. So we looked into a toolkit that aims to tackle these issues from NVIDIA. It's NeMo Guardrails. With it, you can further tailor your conversational apps to include or exclude domain knowledge and maybe mitigate the risks associated with misinformation or offensive content. This should help instill a little bit more confidence in ourselves and our users, or at least get us a step closer to creating conversations that are a little bit more user friendly and maybe more intelligent. Like the name suggests, the toolkit helps your team set up guardrails for your LLM to steer conversations in a certain direction, perhaps a topic, or maybe just to keep the conversation from veering off track altogether. They aim to support three categories of guardrails: safety, security, and topical. It works excellent with frameworks like LangChain, and it works really well with all kinds of different LLMs. So we're going to keep things pretty simple, just to get a feel of what's involved with these guardrails. We're going to build two chatbots. The first one will be a topic restricted chatbot, and then the second one will be free to speak about whatever, except we'll ask it to fact check itself and also confess if it's generating some kind of hallucination. In this video, we will cover the necessary setup, and then we'll go through the first robot. NeMo Guardrails is written in Python, so we'll install the toolkit with pip, and we'll keep our sandbox in a virtual environment using venv. If you prefer to use Docker containers, then go ahead and you can skip this step. We'll be using OpenAI's large language model for this example, so we're gonna eventually install the OpenAI package. But to make calls to the OpenAI API, we're gonna need the API key. If you don't have an account, then go ahead and sign up. Once you sign up, it should look like this. And if you look at the top right corner, you will find your profile information. And if you click on that, and then you go down to view API keys, this is where you're going to create one if you don't have one already. So I already have a couple, and I don't need to create a new one, so I won't, but this is how it would go. You can name your key however you like, and then you would just say create secret key. Once you do that, they will show you what your secret key is and give you an opportunity to copy paste it onto another text file so that you can keep it for later use. And you should, because they won't show this again. I've already done that, so let's just move on and set up our project. All right, I'm gonna do everything on my desktop for now, just for simplicity. And I'm gonna create a folder specifically for this project, so I'll call it my project. And I'll go there, and this is where we're going to create our virtual environment. So let's do that. This will take a few seconds. All right. Okay, so we are ready to install our libraries, and so we only need two for now. The first one's going to be NeMo Guardrails. All right, and now let's make sure we have the OpenAI package. This one's pretty quick. Okay. All right, this is where we need to let our system know what the OpenAPI or OpenAI API key is. Okay, we are pretty much set up. Now, just to make sure that everything went well, let's just type NeMo Guardrails help and see if we get our help menu. There we go. So we are good to go. So let's finish setting up our project folder structure. We're going to need a couple of folders. So let's go to our virtual environment and make a directory called config. This is where we're going to keep our guardrails and configuration files. And within our config file, we need to create another folder. And we'll call that one time use topical, since our bot is going to be a one topic bot. And the name of this folder is what's going to show up in the drop-down menu when we launch our bot in the user interface. We still need one more. Let's go into this folder and create our knowledge base folder. And the documentation suggests that we just call it KB. So that's what we're going to do. And that's it. We should be good to go. If you'd like to know more details about how to set things up, you can always check out their documentation page. It's actually pretty good. This is their Git repo. And if you scroll down to the README, the documentation is right here. They also have some examples that you can try and other documents. So we will create a chatbot that is programmed to provide information only about one subject. In this case, it's about the 2022 American Time Use Survey provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows how much time was spent working and where, like home or office, how much time was spent doing household activities, engaging in leisure and sports activities, as well as providing childcare. So we're going to use NVIDIA's topical rail example as a guide. You can find that in the examples right here. And topical rails, this one right here. And don't worry, I will include all the necessary links in the description of this video. So what do we need for our bot? We'll need to give it general instructions as well as guardrails to make sure it sticks to our chosen topic. And finally, the necessary data for the knowledge base. Let's take a look at the necessary configurations. Every bot is going to need a general options file, which is usually done in YAML. And then we're going to need guardrail definitions. These are written in Colang, which we'll get into in a minute. Now the next three bullets, they're as needed. So in our case, we will need the knowledge base documents, and that's going to be a markdown file. And for other bots, you may or may not need this, but you can also include actions or initialization code. And both of those are written in Python. Now, if we take a look at the general options, it'll have 3 sections. They don't all have to be included. The only one that's actually necessary every time is the language model section, where you specify which model you're going to use. But you do have the option of providing general instructions and sample conversation as well. So let's take a look at the config file that we're going to use for our bot. Okay. So here you can see the 3 sections: instructions, sample conversations, and models. We are going to look at it from the bottom. So let's concentrate on this area here. The type currently is main, is the only option for this. They plan on supporting the use of multiple models for various tasks in the future, but for now, main is the only option. Then you have the engine. This is the LLM provider. If LangChain supports the provider, then you can use it here as well. Some of the prompts were optimized for OpenAI models, so if you choose to use others, it's up to you to optimize as needed. You also have a choice of creating your own custom models. We could also have another attribute to this section, and it would be parameters. So it would be right below models, so parameters. And this would be something like the temperature of the model. But we are going to use the default settings, so we don't have to worry about that one. Let's take a look at the general instructions, which are at the top of this YAML file right over here. So you can think of this as the system prompt that will be included in every prompt submitted to the API. So you don't want to create this to be too long if you want to keep in mind the use of tokens, if you have a token limit. And then let's take a look at the sample conversation. So this part here, so this gives the model an idea of how the dialogue should develop and its tone. It'll be attached to every prompt, so also keep this short and sweet. And if you take a look, this is written in Colang, the sample conversation. So Colang is a modeling language and runtime developed by NVIDIA for conversational AI. It is meant to be similar to Python for easy adoption. For the purpose of this video, we'll need to know about message and flow blocks of Colang code. So message blocks are used to define user and bot message types. The flow blocks define how the chat should develop. They'll contain the order of user and bot message types, as well as other logic. Let's take a look at the first guardrail file. In our case, it's going to be time use Colang. As you can see, the syntax is pretty straightforward. You begin the message blocks with define user or define bot. So define user here and define bot. This is followed by sample utterances. By definition, are the raw text coming from the user or the bot. If more than one utterance is provided for the bot message blocks, then the bot may choose one at random. Once the messages are defined, you'll need to specify the flow or flows. They let the bot know how you'd like parts of the dialogue to develop. In this example, the flows are simple, but they can be more involved and include if, when, or else statements, as well as these variables and actions. Actions are basically like custom code, and we won't really need them for this bot, so we don't have to worry about actions right now. But you can see where the flow is defined here. So define flow is how you would start those blocks. Let's take a look at the off-topic guardrail, because we need to let the robot know how to handle this situation as well. So again, you're just going to see different blocks, some for the user, some for the bot, and then we're going to need flow blocks. So this is where you would just include some of the questions that the bot might run into, just to let it know, hey, none of this has anything to do with our knowledge base. In that case, this is how we expect you to behave. Okay, finally, we need to feed the knowledge base to our bot. In our case, the American Time Use Survey needs to be included in our project. So let me show you the condensed report that we're going to use. So we omitted the charts and graphs, as well as some of the technical notes, just to keep this simple for our example. And also notice that this is written in Markdown. Also, let me show you the actual report, in case you're wondering what that looks like. So the full report can be found here, and I'll include this link below. And you can see that it has quite a bit of info. The technical notes is what I omitted from our text file, and the graphs at the end. These guys, these charts. But if you're curious about the details, you can take a look at that on your own. Okay, so let's take a look at how we ended up setting up our project. So we're in my project, and if you look at our config folder, we have our time use topical folder, and within that you can find our config YAML, the 2 guardrail Colang files, and then we have our knowledge base within its own directory, and that is our markdown file for the time use survey. So you want to make sure this is how yours looks before we run the bot. There are several ways to get the bot running. You can do this through the CLI or an API or a user interface. We're going to go for the user interface for this example, but you can learn about the other methods in the documentation if you're curious. Okay, let's make sure that our virtual environment is activated before we do anything. Okay, and then let's travel to our VEMB folder. And here is where we can just type guardrails server to kick off our bot. Before I push enter, you do have an option to switch the port if you don't like the default, which is 8000. And if you'd like to do that, you write port and then whatever number you like. But I'm okay with 8000, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. And oops, it's NeMo guardrail servers. And there we go. So this is how the user interface looks. So if you've used ChatGPT, then you're kind of familiar with this setup. You can start new chats on the left, and you would start writing your prompts down here to ask the bot any questions. But you want to make sure that you're using the correct bot configuration. And for our case, this drop-down menu is only going to have one option because we only gave it the topical or time use topical directory within the config file. So we are ready to start chatting with our bot. Hello, about what topics can we chat? All right, that's looking good. Well, what is that? So far, so good. "69% employed persons did some or all of their work at their workplace." Okay. If you want to fact check, you can always go back to the report and make sure that your bot is answering correctly. I've already checked this out before, and it's accurate, so we can move on. We need to make sure that if we ask questions off topic, that it is, answering correctly. We don't want it to veer off from the conversation. So that's good. Okay, so it looks like our guardrails, our off-topic guardrails, is also doing its job. Let's try one more question and make sure that it still does what we want it to do. Can you direct me to the right place to find out more about public sports activities in Tampa? Sorry, no, I can't. Okay, good. That's exactly what we wanted. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to highlight that we used a specific model to run this bot, which you saw in our config file. It's Text DaVinci 003, which was recommended in the documentation. But you do have other options, and if you go to the OpenAI models, you can have a list of everything that they offer, and also how they charge, and max tokens and things like that. So I'll add this link as well to the description. To shut down your robot, just hit Control-C, and that should take care of that, and then deactivate your environment if you are shutting everything down. Okay, so as far as keeping the robot on topic, I think Guardrails really did a good job. Probably the hardest part was getting familiar with Colang. I would suggest looking at existing code. That's where I started. And then I basically tweak things to my needs, and then trial and error. Don't forget that the documentation for these guardrails is pretty good. So definitely check those out. I'll include the link with the description to the video. If you'd like to experiment with the fact checking Rails and the hallucination Rails, then check out the blog on which this video was based. It goes through all of the details on how to implement those two Rails, and it also has sample Colang files. They actually include some actions within them, which is something that we need to cover. Perhaps that'll be the next video. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and maybe we'll see you next time.